morning and welcome from the Philippines. So the journey that I'm going to tell you about started a couple of months ago. I was interested in the pure nickel strings, and I had heard that they had a warmer, more classic sound, and so that interested me. I'd also heard a few people say that they were actually easier on the fingers, and as I've aged, the left hand, the fingers are stiff. I wake up in the morning, they're sort of in pain sometimes, and so I was interested in both those aspects. So I tried out the DR Pure Blues. I have the DR Pure Blues here. DR Pure Blues. Anyway, I really like them. And they're actually available here where I live. So that was a pretty good thing. But I decided at that point I wanted to compare, and I went kind of crazy. And I've compared, or I'm in the process of comparing 6 different sets of pure nickel strings. Now, my criteria were twofold. The first criteria was I wanted the pure nickel strings that nowadays, back to the future, so to speak, a number of brands and a number of manufacturers are making a pure nickel string. But the other thing that I did in my research and I discovered is that it isn't enough to just say pure nickel. You also need, or I decided I needed, the pure nickel that had a round, not a hex core. It was explained to me by several people. The round core, which again is traditional, is a little bit more flexible, a little easier to bend, and a little easier on the fingers. So when I got the DR Pure Blues, I noticed not only did I like the sort of warm traditional sound, but the next day after I put them on, my left hand was about 50 or 75% less stiff and sore than it had been on hex core strings. So that was very interesting to me. So this test is going to be the 6 strings that I found that are both pure nickel and round core. There are some pure nickel strings out there with hex cores. Fender makes one, Gibson makes one, Ernie Ball makes one, several other manufacturers. In fact, there's a couple manufacturers that make both a pure nickel round core and a pure nickel hex core. We'll talk about that. So on this video, I'm going to discuss and try to compare 3 different sets of strings. Here's the 6, by the way, that we're going to ultimately compare. The DR Pure Blues, the GHS Nickel Rockers, again, pure nickel round core, the Pyramid Nickel Classics, again, pure nickel round core, the Curt Mangans, these are called, pure nickel with a round core. Mangan also makes pure nickel with a hex core, but these are the pure nickel round cores. Then we get up in price to the Stringjoy Broadways. Stringjoy Broadways, they've only been making them a couple of years. Again, pure nickel with a round core. And finally, at the most expensive, we have the Tomastic Infeld sliders, blues sliders, I think that's what they're called. And these are a little different. They're pure nickel with a round core, and in the core there's actually silk. I guess that justifies the price maybe. But we'll talk about all 6 of these, but I'll start with the first 3. And I've actually gone from least expensive to most expensive here. So we're going to talk about the first 3. First, the DRs. One of the things that you have to note about all the pure nickel strings with, not the pure nickel strings, all the round core strings, is you have to install them a little differently. I'm going to link below to a link from the Curt Mangan website, a very short, brief video about how to install round core strings. And I found that out after installing my first set of the DRs, because after about 4 weeks, one of the wound strings unwound, and then I discovered, oh, that's one of the potential issues with round core strings, and if you learn to cut them correctly when you install them, you'll eliminate that problem. But that is one of the advantages of the modern hex core, and one of the reasons that manufacturers went away from the round core. But if you do it right, all the round cores will be okay. So I made a sort of a set of criteria. So let me grab that and read that to you. So the criteria that I'm basing these comparisons on are the tone of the string, the ergonomics, meaning how does the string feel, how does it bend, how does it impact my poor old fingers, the ability to stay in tune, the longevity, and the price and value. In terms of all these tests, I use 942s. So almost all these strings are 942s, or the closest I could get to 942s. So that's one comparison. I used both of my electric guitars, one of which is this one, a Telecaster made by Jeff Neville. The other is I have a Fender Strat. So I've been testing with both those instruments. Let's talk about, again, the Pure Blues. This is the least expensive of the 6 strings. I found it, one of the things to tell you in advance, all these strings that I've played sound very similar. The warm, pure nickel sound is a very similar one. You're not going to find a string that's significantly different in sound. They're all very similar. That's the good news. They all, with the exception of one, which I'll get into, were very gentle and mild on my fingers. So that again is good news. You're not going to go too wrong with any of these strings. So let's talk about the DR Pure Blues. Warm, traditional sound, absolutely. Smooth bending. Again, my hand stiffness reduced quite significantly within 24 hours. The next day I woke up, my hand felt great. I didn't have to spend a half an hour loosening it up before I got to play. Stayed in tune pretty well. I rated it on a scale of 1 to 5 as a 4. Now let's talk about longevity. I find no value in simply leaving strings on until they're dead or they break and then saying that's the longevity. I change my strings out at approximately 1 month. So all my testing is going to be based on how were the strings at 1 month? Did it feel like there was lots of life left? Did they still sound and play great, or were they kind of ready to be dead? So I found that as I said, the first test I made with the DRs is at about 4 weeks. One of the strings unraveled, but I suspect that was because of me and my lack of knowledge about how to install them. So therefore, I would say that they lasted pretty long. At about $7, these strings are a great value. You know? So that's the DR Pure Blues. The next set that I tried were the Nickel Rockers, the GHS Nickel Rockers. These are advertised with a couple differences. One, the manufacturer says that they are, in the manufacturing process, they are slightly flattened. That's how they describe it. I couldn't feel any difference, but the manufacturer says they're slightly flattened. The other thing they say is they're a little bit more string tension, and that I think I did feel. There's a couple good things that I really liked about these strings. The first thing that I liked is the packaging. Each individual string is wrapped, packaged in plastic, which in a humid environment like I live in, I really appreciate. So I like that. I like the sound. I said before that all these strings sounded very close to the same. This sounded a little tiny bit brighter, a little bit more pop than the other strings, just a tiny bit, but enough that I could hear it. My guess at the time was that was the extra tension in the string, but I can't prove that. So I really like the sound of these strings. There were two negatives that probably ultimately means I won't be playing these strings again. And one of them is when I put the strings on, the wound strings, the lower 3 strings, all felt sticky. My fingers literally stuck to the strings. At first I just, I cleaned them, I damp, clean cloth, hoping that whatever was on the strings would come off. It did not. I even tried a little bit of alcohol. Again, it didn't. The next day, it felt a little less, and 2 days later, it felt okay, felt fine. What I noticed, so at that point, they played better. But what I noticed in the next week or 10 days is that if my hand got a little sweaty, then I reintroduced the stickiness to the low strings. And so that I didn't like very much. But I did notice that if I kept my hands clean and dry, I didn't get that so much. But that, to me, that was a negative in terms of ergonomics. How did this string actually feel when I played? But the big negative was at about 7 or 8 days, I woke up in the morning and my hands felt much sore and stiffer. And it got worse over the next couple of days. And I think, although I can't prove this, that again, it was a function of the slight extra tension that the string advertises that it has. In the end, I took the strings off, I put them on my Strat so that I'd still have them, I could continue to experiment, but I didn't want my hands to get any, my fingers to get any stiffer. So that was the GHS. Again, from a value standpoint, these are very good. They seem to sell between $7 and $8 a set. Again, there's a lot to like here, but there were the 2 things that I did not like, and that for me ended up probably meaning I won't be buying more of these. The third set in terms of price are the Pyramid Nickel Classics. Now, I played Pyramids years ago, and at the time, Pyramids, which are a German company, were known as a premium company, a premium string with a premium string price, but they're no longer. I got these for, let's see, what did I get these for? I think I paid about $8.99 for sets of these strings. So a little bit more than the DR and the GHS, but not a lot more. Now, I really like these. There's no question. They have a warm, beautiful sound top to bottom. They're smooth. They're easy to bend. Definitely, my hand went back to being less stiff and less painful, my fingers. Everything I like about this. I'm still playing them. They're still on the guitar right now, so I can't determine quite the longevity, but I expect them to last the month that I usually play the strings. The one negative, possibly, and probably my fault, is that right away, when I strung them up, the low E string sounded dead. And I thought that was probably from perhaps unraveling. Again, maybe I didn't cut it well when I installed it, or possibly it was dead in the package. Fortunately, I had another 42 of the Pyramids. I put it on, and I've been good to go ever since. So far in the testing, I really like this string, and we will see how it compares to the 3 more expensive strings as we keep going up. So those were the Pyramids. So my general conclusion at this point so far is all these strings are very playable. They are good value. They last long enough because I like to change out at a month anyway. They may or may not last as long as a hex core. But if you like the pure nickel sound, if you like that classic traditional sort of sound, and you like a bendability that is a little bit gentler on your fingers, then all these will be to your liking. So the next round of videos I will make as soon as I have finished experimenting with the Curt Mangan, the Stringjoys. I have a prejudice towards Stringjoys. I love their regular strings and have used them for years. and the Tomastic infelt sliders. I also have a prejudice toward these because I've used Tomastic infelt other jazz strings on the jazz box that I have, so, and I love those. So I'm expecting these to be nice, but we'll find out. Anyway, hope you found this at least a little bit informative. Like I say, part 2 will be coming up, comparing the final 3 sets of strings, and then we'll sort of do a general wrap-up. Thanks.